We're back with Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. He is the head of research and development here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and you are the director of the Autism Research Group, an organization that you guys should all be familiar with, and you should tell us the website so they can go and do the survey for parents.
Sure. It's www.autismresearchgroup.org.
Okay.
And we're an independent nonprofit research institute dedicated to doing research that produces real-life improvements for families living with autism.
So if you've been sitting there and thinking, well, you know, I saw this study, I saw that study, nobody asked me what I thought they should be researching. Nobody ever asked me. I'm very fond of saying that. Well, somebody did just ask you. Dr. Jonathan Tarbox just asked you what you think. And all you have to do is go to that site and fill out the survey, and it counts. You guys make your decisions based on what you hear.
We're designing programs of research based on parent request.
How wonderful is that? That's just absolutely fabulous. So you have officially been asked, you've been invited to the party. Now you can't sit there and say that anymore. Okay. So we were talking last week about this new set of guidelines that came out that specify what quality ABA therapy should look like for children with autism.
Right, and so there's a huge degree of variation in quality, right, between different treatment programs, different agencies, between different states in the country, and certainly between different countries in the world.
Yeah.
A huge degree of variability in how ABA treatment is implemented for folks on the spectrum, right? Different age groups, different intensities, different scope of treatment, et cetera. And basically, until now, you know, folks have basically been going by sort of their gut feeling or their clinical judgment or what they were trained to do by their mentor. There's been a few textbooks out there that sort of covered some of this, but no one has come out and said, here's the model, here's what it should look like, here are sort of the main elements you should be looking for in terms of ensuring a top quality program. And so the BACB has now released these guidelines a week or two ago, and they're very, very helpful. Of course, they can't cover every single detail, but it's a great starting point.
Okay, is it just me? Is it a little shocking that nobody has done this before?
The answer to that is kind of a long answer. If you go through graduate school in ABA and you get really good quality training in ABA, it makes sense that nobody did this, because it's not supposed to be a cookie cutter approach. It's not supposed to, we shouldn't need this. And so a top quality ABA professional doesn't need this. This document is not for top quality, top of the line trained ABA professionals. This document is for parents, and this document is for insurance companies. And so that will help folks sort of sort through the wheat and the chaff. So there's nothing on here that we haven't already thought of and we haven't already been implementing, right? But it's nevertheless, it's a very helpful document for the community at large.
So for you guys, this is a duh. You do this every day of the week anyway. I know you do it.
In fact, we were already writing a document just like this. And then this comes out and we say, great, we don't need to now.
But this is more of an answer to those of us who've said, how do I tell? How would I tell?
Sure.
People ask us that all the time.
And insurance companies don't know what to fund. They're saying, well, do we fund 1 hour a week? Do we fund 40 hours a week? What kind of credentials should someone need to supervise an ABA program? What kind of credentials do they need to implement the ABA program? How do we know when the kid's done? How do we know how many goals the kid should be working on, et cetera? All these questions. And so this document was composed to address and answer some of these questions that are coming from insurance companies.
And so in that sense, it's very timely right now as more and more states are getting insurance. Well, I feel good about that. I'm glad I asked. Okay, so where would you like to start? Because we talked a little bit last week about a couple of different things and things that an ABA program should have, and we're here at the chapter of it. And by the way, we should say that you can all download this for free.
That's right.
That we are
BACB.com.
Yes.
And it's on the homepage, and it says something about new guidelines, and you can
right at the
click
top
through and download the PDF for free.
Exactly. And so
I recommend all parents of folks on the spectrum have a look at this document.
Yes, and I've been slowly reading it, which is why we don't have the hard copy here for you, because it's in my car because I've been reading.
And we should tell your audience as well that it's not written in boring scholarly sort of researchy language. This is written in real life, makes sense, practical language.
It's very accessible. And very wisely done that way, since that's the audience for it. Okay, so we're in the chapter that talks about clinical supervision and case management. You tell me when you want me to scroll what in terms you want to talk about.
So they give recommendations on basically every aspect of ABA you can think of. Again, not going into every single level of detail, but good solid contribution in every major area. And so we talked about some of them last week. Now let's discuss briefly sort of what clinical supervision and case management of an individual's individual's ABA program should look like.
Okay.
And the first thing that they mention is about half or more of what your supervisor does for your child's program should be direct observation of your child's program.
Okay.
So, does your supervisor need to spend time doing case management and program development in the office? Yes, absolutely. But at least half of the time that they spend on your child's case should be looking at your child's case.
Okay,
so
important
actually
distinction.
Being physically present.
Important distinction, though, is not half of the time that your child is in therapy, half of the time that the case supervisor
spends. So let's say your supervisor spends, 6 hours a week supervising your child's program. At least 3 of those hours, they should be observing your child in school, observing your child receiving therapy, running team meetings where your child is present and you're present, training you in your home with your child, all these different types of activities that involve working directly with you and your child.
Okay.
So if your provider is spending a lot more than 50% of the time just sitting at their desk, or I'm sorry, your supervisor, that's a red flag. So direct involvement, direct supervision of what's really happening is something that is just necessary across the board in ABA programs.
All right, great, good to know. Okay, and we've got this lovely. Do you want to talk about this next?
Sure. Yeah, a little flow chart on what page is this?
We are on. I have no idea.
Doesn't matter.
We're on page 29.
Okay. So yeah, they put together sort of a flow chart that shows the overall progression from
and they're seeing it here on our screen too.
Excellent. From when your child enters their program to when they're discharged. So let's scroll up to the bottom, or to the top, sorry.
Okay.
And so the first thing that's going to happen when your child comes through the door of a good quality ABA clinic is they're going to conduct a variety of assessments, right? So if your child has challenging behavior, which most kids on the spectrum have some form of challenging behavior, they're going to do a functional assessment, right? Some kind of functional behavioral assessment of your child's challenging behavior. If your child needs to learn any skills, which of course pretty much everyone on the spectrum has some kind of skill deficits, and so they're going to need to do some kind of assessment of what skills are most important and appropriate for treatment. And of course they should talk to you as a parent. They should be asking your opinion, what are your biggest areas of need, and then they should also do some kind of comprehensive assessment of what your child can currently do. So here at CARD, and now publicly available, we have the CARD Skills Curriculum and Skills Index, which is the most comprehensive skills assessment in the world for folks on the spectrum. There's a variety of other systems out there. There's the VB-MAP, the ABLES. The most important thing, though, is folks should be doing, the ABA providers should be doing a skills-based assessment or curriculum-based assessment, not a standardized assessment.
Okay.
Standardized assessment is like a traditional psychological test, like an IQ test, let's say, that gives you an idea of how your child compares to the average population of children of the same age, but it doesn't tell you specifically what to work on.
Okay.
So if I say your child has a verbal IQ of 70, that definitely indicates they have some catching up to do in language development. But what do we teach? Do we teach requesting? Do we teach labeling? Do we teach conversational skills? Do we teach assertiveness? Do we teach prepositions, shapes, colors, numbers? Where are the holes, right?
Yeah.
And so a curriculum-based assessment will tell you specifically what exact skills your child needs to work on. And so that's critical. And that should be part of every top quality ABA program as your child comes in the door.
This is really interesting because we've had a parent that I've been talking to this week that said, I've got a child who's 15 on the spectrum. We didn't do ABA before, thinking about starting it now, concerned about funding, but in a state where they have insurance reform.
Great.
And but it's only this lump sum of money, and I don't know that that's enough money.
Right.
And I said, of course you don't, because how could you know? How could you know if that's going to be enough? And that it's really important first thing out the gate to get a full assessment of where your child is at. So I'm not barking up the wrong tree here. And because, and I think it's important to get an assessment from somebody that you trust that's going to give you an assessment of actually what your child needs, where they are, and not in relation to how much money you have or how much funding you have or how much insurance you have.
Right, and that's it's an important detail that you point out, because what a lot of funding providers will do is ask the ABA agency to make recommendations that fit with the funding that the the funding provider is willing to give. So we want you to recommend about 5 to 10 hours a week because that's all we're going to pay for anyway. So if you recommend more than that, you're just going to make the families mad. And what we say, and what any ABA provider with good integrity should say is, we're going to make recommendations based on what's clinically appropriate and based on what's been proven to work in research. We're not going to make recommendations based on what you want or what funding is available. And will that frustrate the families sometimes? Yeah, of course. Yeah. But would it be better to lie to the families or mislead them? No, obviously not.
Well, and I was saying the other day, it's like, you know, if your doctor writes you a prescription and says you need to take this many milligrams of penicillin over the next 10 days, they write you the prescription. They don't say how many pills can you afford.
And then I'll write you a prescription.
And so you take the prescription to the pharmacist, and the pharmacist says it's going to be $24.95, and if you only have $12, you have to make a value judgment there about what you're going to do. But you know, I want to know. You know, don't tell me that you're going to give me a prescription for something that isn't going to work and have me pay the $12 and have it not work, which I know a lot of families have had that happen.
That's right.
So really important that you get that independent assessment that is not tied to the funding, so that you know where you are. And then, you know, I mean, and sometimes it is frustrating, but at least you know what you're facing in that moment. And I think that that's key for families.
Absolutely. And honestly, it's just a basic issue of integrity and honesty with your clients that you're serving. As an ABA provider, as any kind of healthcare provider, you shouldn't be misleading your clients just because whoever's paying for treatment wants you to. That's crazy. It doesn't, you know.
And a lot of what had been happening over the last couple of years was that if you went to get an assessment, it was thousands of dollars. And so what people did the assessment, had the school do an assessment, or had in California have the regional center do an assessment because that was the funding agency. But what happened was that sometimes you got a result back that you didn't know whether it matched what they could give, or if it was what was actually true for the child, and it leaves you with that doubt. So I think, if possible, and now with insurance paying for it, you should have some leeway about who you can get the assessment from. Hopefully it will lead to you being able to get an assessment that isn't tied to the funding source.